The reinforced workstation hit the floor with a deep metallic thum. Instructor Vorkesh folded his arms. Remember, cadets heavy world species only. Lightworlders shouldn't strain themselves. The aliens laughed. Liam Mercer flexed his fingers, stepped forward, and gripped the table. Human, Vorkesh chuckled. Don't embarrass yourself. Liam lifted the entire workstation straight off the ground. The laughter died instantly. A datapad shattered on the floor. 3 hours earlier, the exophysiology lab had hummed with its usual anticipation. Rows of alloyed benches gleamed under daylight spectrum lighting, and dozens of cadets from across the Union's outer systems had assembled for what had become an annual favorite strength comparison day. The lab's reinforced plating and medical crew on standby hinted at the nature of the class. Most cadets took it as a challenge. A few came in with injury waivers from last year's attempts. Liam Mercer arrived just before the biometric lock sealed the door. He looked like he always did, calm, lean, and just barely within regulation attire. No military buzz cut, no exaggerated posture, just a worn pack over one shoulder and a quiet glance across the room as he took the only empty bench, far from the instructor podium. Vorkesh tapped the input node on his wrist. Lights dimmed slightly, and the holo display shimmered to life behind him. A 3D scan rotated above the podium, showing a series of skeletons and musculature layouts from various species: bulky frames, dense bones, fibrous overlays. In the center, a human structure stood like a visual afterthought: lighter bones, narrower stance, more vascular complexity than bulk. "Welcome, cadets," Vorkesh announced, in a voice that vibrated at frequencies too low for humans to hear clearly without translation. His torso armor flexed as he gestured to the display. Today's comparative demonstration will focus on graviform adaptation. In other words, how your ancestors responded to the planets that birthed you. The room leaned in, attentive. Vorkesh loved these lectures. Heavy worlders evolved under crushing gravity, he continued. They developed compact skeletons, stabilizing plates, reinforced joints. Every motion costs energy, so evolution demanded efficiency and strength. He nodded toward a towering red-scaled cadet near the front. Take Zorith, third-generation Karul blood, a 6G native. His people evolved with twice the vertebral segmentation of yours truly, and it shows. Zorith nodded, proudly. A faint mechanical hiss came from his spine as it realigned to sit straighter. Mid-worlders, Vorkesh went on, have a balance, not strong, not weak, adaptable, agile, useful in narrow scenarios, but not impressive. He paused, tapping the control again. The human skeleton expanded slightly in the display. Labeled annotations appeared: dexterity, flexibility, soft tissue plasticity. Under the heading, Lightworld species. And then, we have humans. The pause was intentional. Laughter rippled across the room before the joke even landed. Liam said nothing. He'd heard all this before. At Helion Academy, species pride was baked into the culture. When you came from a civilization that had lifted itself into orbit under gravity that bent steel, you didn't easily respect a race that evolved throwing rocks for fun. Vorkesh gave the crowd a moment to enjoy the implication, then raised both hands to settle them. Humans are fascinating, dexterity-focused, emotionally volatile, fast reflexes, but low graviform output, and that's why we don't normally invite Lightworlders to participate in physical strain trials. Another round of snickers. Liam drummed his fingers on the bench, eyes fixed on the equipment lining the front of the room. Vorkesh moved to the centerpiece of the lab floor, a wide alloy-framed workstation loaded with instruments. It wasn't the kind of desk you'd find in a school. This one had been built for deep space maintenance simulations. Titanium corners, integrated power cells, shock-locked wheels that didn't roll without a biometric unlock. This, Vorkesh said, patting it with his four-fingered hand, is an original Kyratech build, reinforced beyond standard lab tables. Mass, 410 kilograms under Helion gravity. He glanced toward the back. That's almost 900 of your Earth pounds, human. Someone whistled. Someone else raised a datapad. Now, we'll begin the voluntary lift trial. Zorith stood first. His approach was methodical, clawed feet, positioned with care, talons dug in for leverage. He wrapped one arm under a corner of the table and hissed as hydraulic veins pumped oxygen-rich fluid into his muscles. With a guttural exhale, he lifted. The workstation rose a few centimeters on one side, trembled, then slammed back down. The lab applauded. A second cadet followed a burly Circonian with elbow joints that twisted in both directions. He managed a 5-second hold at shoulder height, but only on one end. The third attempt barely got a corner up. When the fifth cadet failed, Vorkesh laughed, clearly enjoying himself. See, even the best of you struggle. This is not about showing off, it's about understanding anatomy and evolution. Our ancestors earned their strength through survival. Those from lighter worlds, well, let's just say they survived by other means. More laughter. Then Liam stood up. There was a pause, just a beat, and then a wave of actual laughter swept the room. One cadet started recording immediately. Another began whispering predictions into their translator. Vorkesh raised one brow plate. "Human," he said. "Don't embarrass yourself." Liam didn't answer. He stepped forward and examined the workstation. Not dramatically, just calm observation. He tapped the frame near the midpoint, nodded to himself, and circled to the center of the long side. Hands slipped into place not under the corner, but under the edge, near the structural spine. He adjusted his stance, then lifted. The entire workstation rose off the floor in a smooth, unbroken motion. No shaking, no straining, just controlled motion, like a man shifting a couch in a living room. Silence. Liam's eyes scanned the room. Like this? A datapad hit the floor and cracked. The biomonitors along the walls flashed red. "Impossible," someone whispered. "Check the anchors," barked another. "It must have been unlocked." A third cadet backed up involuntarily, bumping into a bench behind him. How? He didn't even brace. Vorkesh stared, not at the human, but at the scanner readout. Numbers flickered, pressure calculations redlined. One graph jittered and then flatlined entirely. "Put it down," Vorkesh said, too quickly. "That's enough." Liam gently lowered the workstation until it touched the floor with a soft metallic thunk. He dusted his hands on his uniform pants and glanced around. "You said lunch was after this?" No one responded. The class stood frozen. Then the panic began. The scanners refused to recalibrate. Two cadets argued about recalculating gravitational coefficients. A third began cross-referencing human metabolic outputs with known species. Vorkesh barked into his comms for admin override on the sensor suite. In the middle of it all, Liam stepped back to his bench, sat down, and opened a protein bar. He wasn't smirking, he wasn't proud. He was just hungry. Eventually, the room calmed enough for Vorkesh to say something. His voice, when it came, lacked its usual smugness. "Cadets, new classification protocol is being uploaded to the database. Humans will be designated high-impact kinetic burst species, not suitable for standard lifting tests." No one laughed this time. Liam unwrapped the second half of his protein bar and said through a mouthful of peanut butter, "So, are we done here?" He didn't mean it sarcastically. But a dozen cadets began revising their notes in real time, mumbling new terms under their breath. High impact. Kinetic burst. Human. Across the galaxy, strength had always meant resistance to gravity. That definition would need updating. The recalibration protocols took 3 days. By the time Liam returned to the exophysiology lab, the workstation had been removed, the scanners had been replaced, and a new set of reinforced flooring tiles had been installed beneath the central platform. Officially, the repair logs cited unexpected resonance stress fractures. Unofficially, everyone just called it the Mercer drop. The nickname irritated Liam more than he let on. He hadn't meant to show off. He hadn't even known the table was that heavy. Back home, he used to shift his uncle's tool benches the same way when it was time to sweep the garage. But that detail didn't seem to matter to the rest of the cadets anymore. Everywhere he went, whispers followed. "That's him. The Lightworlder. No way he lifted it. I saw the footage. He didn't even grunt. Something's wrong with their muscle tissue. It's not normal." By the end of the week, the Helion Academy's comparative physiology database had pushed a full patch across all its remote learning nodes. A new species tag appeared next to every human cadet's profile. Human, Homo sapiens, high-impact kinetic burst species. Note, not suitable for static gravity assessment paradigms. Liam had never seen so many highlighted datapads in his life. It was like everyone had just discovered a new predator in the biome and weren't sure whether to run or bow. He tried ignoring it. It worked for about 2 hours. In hydraulics practicum the following day, 2 Circonian cadets refused to partner with him. Not because we don't like you, one had insisted, but, calibration variance. In interstellar ethics, a Talvani student kept glancing at Liam's hands every time he took notes. By the end of the lecture, Liam noticed she'd drawn a sketch of him lifting the workstation on her display pad. Even the AI instructors began adapting. On the 3rd morning after the incident, Liam entered the gravity resistance lab for a mandatory conditioning session. The room was lined with programmable resistance walls, each capable of simulating up to 10 times Earth gravity. As he stepped inside, the system pinged his ID and displayed a blinking alert. Warning: user flagged for kinetic burst capability. Recalibrate input thresholds, Y/N. Liam sighed and tapped yes. The system beeped in acknowledgement, then paused. Recalibration failed. Manual override required. Please consult supervisor. Of course, he muttered. The supervisor on duty, an elderly Chitarka with compound eye ridges and a permanent air of disapproval, regarded him like an unboxed anomaly. She didn't speak until she had scanned his profile 3 times. You're the table lifter. I have a name. Yes, and now you also have a classification warning. She tapped into the system, made a few adjustments, and grumbled. Your readings don't fit any of our resistance curves. The wall might collapse if we use the standard loadouts. I can use something lighter. The instructor narrowed her eyes. You already did. By midweek, things had escalated. A group of engineering cadets from the Orbital Mechanics Division requested to borrow Liam for a biomechanics study. He declined. The next day, they tried again, this time offering to build him a custom bench press, just for research. He declined again. He didn't want to become a project. But it was already too late. Word had spread beyond the academy. Civilian news forums picked up clips from the incident, first local, then galactic. A popular breakdown channel called Biologic Explained posted a 10-minute segment titled, How the Weakest Species Lifted 410 Kilograms Like a Chair. It was viewed 3 million times in 2 days. And with it came questions. Was it a mutation? Is human musculature fundamentally different? Are all humans like this? Are we training our cadets wrong? The Union's Military Physiology Board released a statement saying more study was needed. Helion Academy's head of research approved a full reclassification of human kinetic profiles. A few conservative academic voices called it a fluke, but none of them could erase the footage. It wasn't what Liam wanted to be known for, especially not when he was just trying to get through a xenobiology midterm without being asked if he could flip a shuttle. The only one who didn't seem fazed by any of it was Zorith. The Karol cadet who had gone first during the Workstation trial approached Liam during meal rotation 2 days later. Most cadets still gave Liam a wide berth in the dining hall, but Zorith sat down without hesitation, his long legs folding in a way that kept his tail from knocking over the adjacent bench. I've been studying your skeletal ratios, Zorith said without preamble. Your torque generation potential is unusual. Thanks, Liam said, around a bite of starch cake. You have a spinal hinge zone unaccounted for in the standard database. And your limb alignment allows energy storage through soft tissue recoil. That's rare, inefficient, normally. But in your case, it's like a compression spring. Liam wiped his mouth. We just call it having knees. Zorith's nostrils flared. Fascinating. They ate in silence for a while. Then Zorith leaned in. I want to spar. Liam blinked. Like, fight? Not full combat, controlled exchange. I want to see how your kinetics respond in close quarters movement. Your species evolved for burst force, yes? Let's test the boundaries. I'm not really a fighter. Neither am I. That's why it will be fair. Liam chuckled but shook his head. I already got enough attention for lifting a table. I'm not trying to get a new nickname because I broke your tail. You wouldn't, Zorith said evenly. I'd break your nose first. Liam glanced at him, then laughed. Fair. They didn't fight. Not that day. But the invitation stuck with Liam. It was the first time someone had spoken to him like a fellow cadet, and not a terrifying glitch in the database. Later that week, he walked past a training arena where a few midworlders were sparring under instructor supervision. They moved in arcs, calculating their motions based on gravitic balance and muscle rhythm. Liam watched for a minute, then left before anyone noticed. Back in his dorm, he sat on the floor, pulled out a resistance band, and looped it around one foot. He wasn't a bodybuilder. He didn't train for max output. His strength had always been functional, not flashy. But now people looked at him like he had something to prove. Even if he didn't. The next day, he entered the biomechanics lab early. Instructor Vorkesh wasn't there yet. The lab assistant, a young Drail with iridescent skin, was setting up force sensors on the new equipment table. Liam walked past quietly. The Drail looked up. "Hey, you're Mercer, right?" "Yeah." The assistant hesitated. "I calibrated this for mid-tier resistance, but after what happened, I'm not sure if it's safe." Liam stopped. "You mean the lift table?" The Drail nodded. "I watched the footage. You didn't even adjust for shock return. Most species would have ruptured a tendon. I didn't know how much it weighed. That's what makes it worse." Liam exhaled and stepped up to the table. "Okay, let's do it your way. What's the test?" The assistant blinked. "You're volunteering? Let's get it over with." The test wasn't about raw lifting this time. It was about timed force application, how quickly a cadet could generate peak output from rest. The scanner tracked limb acceleration, impulse force, and stabilization timing. Liam completed it in under 5 seconds. The readout broke again. This time, the assistant didn't panic. He just stared at the data, then quietly turned the monitor away from the room. Liam stepped back, rolled his shoulder, and stretched his neck. As he walked out, he passed Vorkesh, who entered with a stack of notes under one arm. "Cadet Mercer," the instructor said, stopping him. "I see you've begun participating in voluntary trials." "Just one." Vorkesh's gaze narrowed. "You know this changes things." Liam didn't answer. "You've become a calibration marker." "I didn't ask to be." "Neither did Zorith, or me, or any of us." Liam nodded. "So, what do I do?" Vorkesh considered him. "Adapt, like the rest of us." Liam walked away. He wasn't sure if that was advice or a warning. Either way, he knew one thing. Lifting the table had made a statement. What came next would require something else entirely. By the second week after the incident, Liam Mercer could no longer enter a room without someone adjusting a scanner. It didn't matter if he was just walking into a lecture hall or lining up in the sim bay for an environmental suit fitting. Wherever he went, someone either updated calibration settings or quietly stepped aside, as though human mass had become unpredictable, as though the simple act of moving might register as a seismic event. Liam didn't complain. He just kept walking. The whispers had shifted from curiosity to concern. "They're all like that," I heard. "My cousin served on a transport with a human," says one broke a bulkhead just opening a door too fast. "It's the tendons, elastic recoil or something." "No, it's cortical override suppression. Their brains don't self-limit force the same way." None of them ever said it to his face. But Liam could hear them anyway. It came to a head during interspecies coordination, a mandatory course where cadets were assigned mixed-race squads and dropped into simulated planetary operations. The simulations were meant to test more than muscle logistics, communication, problem-solving. Helion prided itself on training cadets to operate beyond species biases. This simulation was on a mock asteroid base. Low gravity, high stress. They were given a fractured habitat scenario, artificial hull breach, limited oxygen, equipment failure. The exercise was timed. The squad had to restore power, seal the breach, and stabilize a patient dummy before the oxygen countdown ran out. Liam was paired with 2 midworlders and a heavy world cadet. None of them made eye contact. "Team Alpha, prepare for drop," the instructor's voice said over comms. Liam checked his harness, locked the seal, and felt the shift as the platform dropped them into the gravity sim chamber. The base shimmered into view, gray walls, flickering lights, a low-frequency rumble mimicking subsurface instability. They landed hard. The team moved quickly. Cadet Sarn took point, scanning for the breach. Julo, the communications specialist, tried rerouting power to the emergency bulkheads. Liam was assigned to environmental systems. The heavy worlder, Torth, took the dummy and started moving it toward the medbay. Things were going well, until a cable tray collapsed. It was a minor failure part of the sim. A maintenance conduit snapped free from the ceiling and fell across the corridor, blocking the path to the power junction. Julo called it out immediately. "Need a lift here. This thing's blocking the reroute." Torth moved to help, then paused. Everyone looked at Liam. He understood what they were thinking. Julo didn't even try to hide it. Might as well let the kinetic burst species handle it. Liam didn't flinch. I'm not a forklift. Yeah, Torth muttered. You're worse. Forklifts have limiters. Liam walked over, gripped the cable tray by its side, and tested the weight. About 30 kilos in Earth gravity, but the mass didn't change in low G. He adjusted his grip and lifted it sideways, not to show off, just to clear the path. The others stepped back, as though it might explode. Thanks, Julo said, eyes locked on the conduit like it had misbehaved. The moment passed, but the tone had shifted. From that point on, no one issued direct instructions to Liam. They asked around him, spoke in implications, treated him like a walking variable. When the simulation ended, they completed all objectives, on time, efficient. But in the debrief, Instructor Harrell frowned at the squad report. I'm reading behavioral fragmentation, she said, tapping the datapad. Lack of direct coordination, over-reliance on one team member for physical tasks, underutilization of available resources. Harrell looked at Liam. You've become a bottleneck. I didn't do anything, he said. Exactly. Liam clenched his jaw. Back in his dorm that evening, he didn't eat. Instead, he opened the Academy's species physiology archives and spent 2 hours reviewing force output charts. He wanted to understand why it mattered so much that he'd lifted a table, what it had changed in the minds of his peers, what line had been crossed. The data wasn't helpful. Humans were outliers on several vectors: fast twitch muscle density, neuromuscular activation thresholds, hormone-triggered force output scaling. But all of it came down to one thing. Humans evolved for motion, short, violent, and often unpredictable. On Earth, nothing stayed still for long. Predators chased, prey dodged, storms hit with days of warning or seconds of none. Over millions of years, human musculature adapted not for sheer weight tolerance like heavy worlders, but for agility, speed, and reactive power. Lifting a table wasn't strength in the way the Academy measured it. It was reflex. A form of intelligence, even. Liam closed the archives and tried to sleep. He dreamed of falling through gravity layers, the table hovering just behind him, never touching the ground. A few days later, Zorith appeared again. This time in the lower gym, where cadets usually trained without supervision. Liam was running through motion drills, box leaps, timed climbs, soft landings. He wasn't trying to draw attention. He just needed to feel normal again. Zoreth watched for a while, arms folded, tail twitching slightly. You move like a predator, the Carl said finally. I move like someone who's tired of tripping over their own label. Zoreth approached the wall bar. Do you want to settle this? Settle what? The fear. Liam stopped. You want to spar again. I want to understand what it is your body does that others fear so much. You're not dangerous, but they think you are, because they don't understand your limits. And you think you will? Zorith cracked his neck, a metallic sound due to the vertebral stabilizers implanted during his adolescence. Let's find out. They squared off on the mats. No crowd, no cameras. Just two cadets trying to understand something no database could explain. Zorith struck first, controlled, fast, aiming to test Liam's defense. Liam slipped the hit, countered with a sidestep and push. Zorith tumbled but rolled cleanly, grinning. You suppress force well. You're holding back. I always am. Zorith lunged again. This time Liam caught the motion early, pivoted under, and applied a simple judo-style throw. Zorith hit the mat with a thud, exhaled, then laughed. I felt it that time. The edge, the moment where you almost let go. Liam offered a hand. Zorith took it. When the Karul stood, he was breathing heavier. Not from exhaustion, but from realization. It's not just your muscles, Zorith said. It's that you're always on the verge of using more than you mean to. That's what scares them. Not your strength, your control. Liam nodded slowly. Now you understand. Zorith looked thoughtful. You don't need to prove anything, but you do need to lead. Lead what? The recalibration. If they're going to rewrite the charts, you might as well be the one holding the pen. Liam didn't answer immediately, but the idea stayed with him. Later that week, when the Academy invited cadets to join an elective research unit for species biomechanics collaboration, Liam signed up. Not because he wanted to be studied, but because someone had to explain that humans didn't break the rules. They were just written differently. The first session was tense. 8 cadets, 5 species, 2 instructors, 1 long reinforced bench between them. Vorkesh was there too, observing quietly. The lead researcher, a calm-spoken Velari named Senna, gestured toward the center of the table where a portable force plate had been installed. "We are not here to prove strength," Senna said. "We are here to understand application. Your muscle doesn't scare us, Cadet Mercer. It fascinates us." Liam looked across the room. Some cadets looked curious, others still wary. But none of them were laughing anymore. He stepped forward, placed one foot on the force plate, and waited for the prompt. This time, no one dared look away. And this time, Liam lifted nothing. He just stood, then jumped once straight up. The sensors lit like a flare. Not from mass, not from struggle, but from the sudden, clean, vertical force. When he landed, Senna whispered something and began typing furiously. Zorith exhaled low. He just lifted his entire body faster than a shuttle launch. The others murmured. But no one ran. They were finally watching with open eyes. For the first time since he picked up that table, Liam wasn't a warning. He was a reference point. And he was just getting started. The recalibration unit became more than an elective. By the start of the new rotation, it had been granted full curriculum status. Not because of protocol or committee votes or some directive from the union's academic board, but because cadets wouldn't stop signing up. What began as a curious offshoot of the biomechanics department turned into a hub of practical exploration. Word had spread far beyond Helion Academy. Other institutions started tuning in. Instructors arrived from orbital colleges, heavy world training clusters, even a few Earth-born specialists. Some came to learn, others came to argue. But all came for one reason. Humans had changed the question. Liam Mercer hadn't meant to start a movement. But there was no stopping it now. The research room, originally a secondary lab with old sensor rigs and outdated flooring, had been refitted twice in 3 weeks. It now held 2 adjustable grav plates, a holographically assisted kinetic field, and a series of zero-lag feedback monitors that displayed real-time force curves. Liam didn't work alone. Zorith was there almost every day, not just as a test subject, but as a bridge. When new cadets hesitated to work beside a human, Zorith was the one who explained the truth that strength was not singular, and humans were not here to replace anyone. They were here to show what else was possible. The tipping point came during the Alliance Graviton trial. It was supposed to be a friendly inter-academy contest, a test of agility, adaptation, and force precision under varying gravity conditions. Not about domination, not about species superiority. But that illusion vanished when the competitors arrived. The Cadron squad showed up in ceremonial gear, plated shoulders and mouth guards, their leader boasting openly about their recent gravity push victories. The Darax contingent mocked the event outright. "Unless there's something heavier than a shuttle," one said, "this will be a waste of flexors." Even the announcer got it wrong during the briefing. "And, representing Helion Academy," she said brightly, "is Cadet Liam Mercer, of Earth, a Lightworlder. This should be interesting." Liam stood alone on the central platform, surrounded by reinforced shock tiles and 1,000 expectant eyes, half of which didn't believe he should be there. The event was called Controlled Output and Reactive Lift. The task sounded simple. Lift an unstable mass across a frictionless surface, redirect mid-movement, and stop without losing control. It was designed to challenge balance more than strength, to test timing, coordination, and impulse adjustment. Most cadets trained for months. Liam had practiced twice. He wasn't the best technician, but he understood one thing no one else did. On Earth, power wasn't about dominance. It was about recovery. The timer started. The mass, a fluid core load cell, wrapped in sensor mesh, slid toward him. Liam dropped low, caught it at the base, and let it push into him. Not resist, receive. Then, in one seamless motion, he turned, redirected, and lifted not with his arms alone, but with the chain of his entire body. Ankle, knee, hip, spine, shoulder. The movement was fast but clean. The load cell rose, rotated midair, and settled in the opposite zone without tipping once. The room erupted into startled silence. Then came the applause. Not because the human had won, but because they had just witnessed something their training never taught them to expect. precision, explosive control, force not as bludgeon but as language. That night, the Helion Academy mainframe registered the highest volume of external physiology data requests in its history. Subsections of the human anatomical profile were updated with tags like dynamic core reactivity and neuromuscular surge potential. More importantly, a new educational note appeared under the exophysiology curriculum. Note to instructors: do not underestimate Lightworld species. Human muscular systems are optimized not for prolonged force, but for reactive application. Classify under burst-adapted motion forms. Note the cognitive and cultural interplay in restraint. Strength without restraint is noise. Humans bring both. Liam didn't see that note for 2 more days. He only found it after Senna called him in for review. The Valari instructor handed him the datapad. "Congratulations," she said. "You're officially a new standard." "I didn't mean for any of this." Senna smiled. "Which is exactly why it matters." He set the datapad down and folded his arms, looking out the window. The moons of Helion hung pale against the starscape, like distant observers still trying to process what they'd seen. "So what now?" he asked quietly. Senna tilted her head. "Now you help us finish what you started." They launched the Mercer Protocol 3 weeks later. Not as a weaponization program. Not as a showcase of freakish strength, but as a new training module teaching cadets across species how to harness force efficiently, how to control motion across unfamiliar gravities, and, most importantly, how to work alongside those whose strengths differed from their own. Liam stood at the front of the first mixed gravity trial group, looking out at 20 cadets, heavy worlders, light worlders, mid-tier species, with no previous edge in physical training. They all stared back at him, curious but respectful. Zorith sat in the back, arms folded, nodding slowly. Liam took a breath. "All right," he said. "Let's talk about your hips." The room laughed, nervously. Then they listened. Months passed. Liam stopped being the guy who lifted the table. He became the guy who redefined the test. Cadets no longer stared at his hands or tracked his footfalls. They asked questions. They offered suggestions. Some even began adapting human movement drills into their own training. And while some still teased, it wasn't mockery. It was recognition. He hadn't destroyed their understanding of strength. He had expanded it. Back in the exophysiology lab, Vorkesh installed a new workstation. Identical build, same weight. But now, next to it, a plaque had been mounted. Human classification, high-impact kinetic burst species. Do not test via static lifting protocols. Below that, in smaller font, it read, "Sometimes, the Lightworlder lifts the whole table. Adjust your expectations accordingly." On Liam's last day before midterm leave, he walked into the lab one last time. It was quiet. Empty. He placed one hand on the edge of the new workstation, then smiled and left it exactly where it was. Strength wasn't about proving anything anymore. Not when everyone finally understood the truth. Humans didn't need to overpower the room. They just needed a moment. A question. A grip. A stance. And when the time came, they would lift. Not to impress. Not to dominate. Just to move the weight. Because it needed moving.